Hey everyone, and welcome to the Flophouse Mini, the off-week episodes where we're not talking about a bad movie, we're just kind of talking. I'm Dan McCoy.
I'm Stuart Wellington.
And I'm Tom Brokaw, American newsman and author of The Greatest Generation.
Yeah,
Some would say the definitive story of the baby boomers.
Yeah, we've got probably our biggest get as a guest. Tom Brokaw is here now.
Dan, you're reading his credits, right? You're gonna give all his credits so everybody.
Dan, I can tell you're a big brokehead. Name for me, what network did I anchor the lead evening news desk for 22 years at?
That would be NBC, Tom.
Oh, wow.
To be honest, I did not expect you to get it correct, and I feel a little silly for asking.
Well, okay. Well, Tom's here, of course, stepping in for Elliot. I got a text right before the show. He was saying something about a butt rash, having just a terrible, contagious butt rash. So.
And that's weird for Elliot, because normally he doesn't text. He really only likes to call when he's calling us about butt rashes.
Yeah.
I've also received many calls in the night from Elliot for that particular malady. But
weird. It's weird. You'd think you'd just go to bed instead of stay up all night with a butt rash. But I guess when you got a butt rash, you're like, fuck it up. I'm just going to make an all-nighter out of it.
Sometimes it's a matter of not being able to sleep.
Oh, yeah. I didn't think about it that way.
So, Tom just kind of swooped in. It was weird. We didn't even really ask him to come. He just heard, I don't know how, that Elliot was not going to be here, and he just jumped in.
Well, let's just say, as America's favorite newsman for 22 years running, I have my ways of getting news. Now, I also wanted to take this opportunity because I do have something specific I wanted to talk about on the program. If I may, I'd like to introduce the topic in my own inimitable way, if I could.
Okay.
Well, with your kind permission, I'll begin.
He's like a vampire. You got to invite him in, Dan.
Okay.
I'll begin with a little excerpt. A beginning is the time for taking the most delicate care that the balances are correct. This every sister of the Bene Gesserit knows. To begin your study of the life of Muad'Dib, then, take care that you first place him in his time. Born in the 57th year of the Padishah Emperor, Shaddam IV, and take the most special care that you locate Muad'Dib in his place, the planet Arrakis. Do not be deceived by the fact that he was born on Caladan and lived his first 15 years there. Arrakis, the planet known as Dune, is forever his place. And that's from the Manual of Muad'Dib by the Princess Irulan.
Oh, I see why Tom showed up, Dan. Tom's a big Dune head, right?
You could say that that particular novel by Frank Herbert has been a little bit of a life manual for me, as anyone who watched me for years on NBC Nightly News would know for a fact.
Yeah.
Now, I'm here because, as you guys know already, the trailer for the new Dune film was just released, and I have a few thoughts about it.
Oh, okay. I guess you might as well enlighten us. Should I pull up the trailer myself, or will you just paint enough of a picture that I don't need it in front of me?
It really depends more on the power of your imagination. The trailer begins, as all great Dunes do, with the Warner Brothers logo and the Legendary Films logo, looking very shiny, not at all what you'd expect on the dusty, gritty surface of the planet Arrakis. Next, we get to our hero, Paul Atreides, played here by Timothy Chalamet.
Now,
he sings.
I'm not even going to address the problems you had with pronouncing his last name, but I believe it is Timotei, not Timothy.
Wait, really?
To me, he's merely a vessel for bringing us the story of Paul Atreides. I don't really care how his name is pronounced, so Timothy Chalamet it will continue to be. So, Paul Atreides, as you know, the heir to the House Atreides, one of the major mercenary and mercantile houses of the Galactic Empire, he says something is going on with his mind that he can't control. We hear this as he kisses Chani, played by Zendaya, who you may know as Michi, who we know is one of the Fremen. Yes,
I know
can I help
Zendaya's
you?
Michi, but I didn't know that you would know her as Michi. That seems, out of your purview a little bit.
I took my grandchildren to see that movie, and frankly, I only know Zendaya as Michi. I don't know what else she is. For a while, I thought Michi was the actress and Zendaya was the character. And so I think only
I
seeing
feel
her
like
now
that's
as...
what the director said about her performance too.
we see her. She is, of course, the daughter of the Imperial planetologist assigned to Dune, Late Keynes, who I do not believe appears in the trailer. Anyway, we see Paul waking up, and he says, there's a crusade coming. He or rather two silhouetted figures that I assume can only be Paul and Channy or Paul and Lady Jessica, his mother, look at fire and fighting on the desert plain. And now is when we get past the preamble and into the real meat of the story of Paul Atreides, as he meets with... Yes?
Would you say that this trailer is good at sort of introducing the story of Dune to those who may not already be familiar with it, or is it just sort of a series of images more so than a plot-heavy trailer? Because you say we're getting into the story of Paul of Dune that we all know, and I've read Dune once, and I saw the David Lynch movie as a very young man, and I still couldn't tell you much about the story of Dune.
Well, like many movie trailers, it starts out with a kind of foreboding, ominous thing. Then you get a little bit of the characters, and then you think the trailer's over, and then there's one last kind of special effects heavy moment, and then the title. I don't really believe that you can summarize all of the majesty of Dune in a 3-minute, 57 or so shot story like this narrative. But to be honest, I've spent so many years of my life now living in Arrakis, in my headspace, that I wouldn't be able to tell you how a Dune newbie would take this kind of trailer. And
now,
so, if
Tom, would you say that living
It would
in
be
Arrakis...
like a Fremen trying to teach like a newborn baby how to survive on the dusty plains of Dune, the planet Arrakis.
Well, you mentioned Fremen. It's at a certain point you forget that you're in the still suit, if you understand what I mean, and it just becomes
understand.
like unto a second layer of skin, and that's what Dune is to me at this point in my life. Daniel, did you have a question about Dune or about my many years in national broadcasting?
Well, I mean, they're kind of tied together, actually, Tom. I was going to ask. You said that you spent so many years living in Arrakis in your mind. Was that as a way of coping with the horrors that you had to report nightly on the nightly news?
No, it was merely because Frank Herbert has spun such an enthralling tale in such a fully realized world that from the first moments, from the first time that I read Dune, honestly, having picked it up somewhat randomly in an airport bookstore, intrigued by the cover showing a desert-type landscape, and I thought to myself, I would be so thirsty if I was walking along that. I wonder what happens there, and just being enthralled. To be honest, it had nothing. If anything, the national news is what saved me from losing myself in Dune. Now, if I can continue, it was only by telling America, my supreme honor of telling America for 30 minutes what was important enough for me to talk about, that I was able to anchor myself in this reality and not lose myself the way a spice addict would to the innumerable visions of an ever-unfolding galaxy.
Okay, so the news was sort of your inception sort of top that allowed you to re-enter the real world.
I think that, much like the movie Inception, that is a thin metaphor, overlaying not much. But I suppose, yes, you could say that. Now, here's where we get to the real meat of the story, as Paul meets with the Bene Gesserit mother, Reverend Mother, Gaius Helen Moyam, played here by Charlotte Rowling, and she is, of course, asking him questions about the visions he receives. This is interrupted by the name of the director, a Frenchman, Denis Villeneuve, who is, of course, the director of movies like Arrival and Sicario. So,
Tom, it's interesting to say that I think that you probably pronounce pronounce that director's last name as well as Elliot might if he were here.
We can only imagine, since he, as mentioned before, is dealing with a medical malady of a particularly sensitive nature. We see a storm over Arrakis. This shot seems to be more filler, to be honest, and perhaps an example of special effects, but they're just building suspense for
building
one
atmosphere.
one of the key iconic moments in the Dune story, when Paul, of course, takes the test of the Gom Jabbar and has to see if his human awareness can overcome his animal instinct to pull his hand from a box full of pain. If he withstands the pain, then he understands that death is worse than pain and that all fear can be overcome. But if his animal instincts overcome his rationality and his human awareness, then of course he cannot take part in his fated role in the Bene Gesserit breeding plan to bring about the enlightenment of humanity in the role of the Kwisatz Haderach, who has access to the visions of the Golden Path. Not much of that is explained in the trailer, but you do find out that he sticks his hand in a very painful box.
Hey Dan, do you think I would succeed in the test of the Gom Jabbar?
Oh boy. Yeah, I think you are the most likely to well, I think I'm the least likely to succeed.
Yeah, you
Let's
get
say that.
smoked, dude.
Let's say that.
I have to, Dan, just as a listener of the podcast, I assume you would tap out before actually taking the test. They would explain to you that a poison-tipped needle would be held to your neck while your hand was put in a box, and that alone would be enough for you to say, you know what, I'm tired, and I don't need to have any of this in my life.
Well,
and you'd probably
like-
go and watch an 80s horror or bikini movie that you had already seen a few times.
That all
that's
seems
totally
accurate.
accurate,
Is that an option? Can you just say,
Yeah.
you know what? No, thanks. Was that because it seems like that would be a pretty good one.
It would end the book pretty quickly.
Okay.
Do you think bikinis exist in the world of Dune? Because everybody seems to just wear black leather.
I think in the universe of Dune, perhaps, but on the world of Arrakis, very unlikely. To expose so much of your skin to the harsh desert sun and the flying grit from the constant sandstorms would leave you with burns and abrasions, not to mention how much moisture you would lose from having such little covering in such a hostile climate. Now, speaking of that hostile climate, we now see a landscape of Arrakis, followed by a shot of Paul walking along a beach somewhere, I'm guessing Caledon, because I don't remember a lot of oceans on Arrakis. We quickly get a moment of Paul training in the use of his energy armor and fighting knife with his weapons master, Gurney Halleck, played here by Josh Brolin. Now, Josh Brolin has the gravitas
Josh who? Josh?
Brola. You may remember him as
Brola?
Thanos from the Avenger movie.
Okay, sure.
When he took possession of the Infinity Gauntlet and was able to eliminate half the universe's population, a scope only matched by the thousands of years of timeline in the Frank Herbert Dune saga. Now, there is a voiceover stating that Paul has learned to rule himself, but he must now learn to rule others. A premonition both of his role as heir to the Atreides house as a son of Duke Leto, who we shall see is played by Oscar Isaac, and also his greater role as
one.
because his name is, to be honest, very easy to say, and his role as the Kwisatz Haderach, who will bring across a jihad throughout the universe, causing the death of billions. I assume they will save that for the second movie. Now, Duke Leto, as we know, played by Oscar Isaac. I got it the first time and for some reason could not stick the landing, the second pronunciation. He's at a tomb of some kind. We're told by a voiceover he rules a planet, but he's going to lose it. A quick shot of, I assume, Lady Jessica, Duke Leto's wife, and Paul's mother, who of course betrayed the Bene Gesserit plan by not having a daughter and having a son, because, as any Dune head knows, the Bene Gesserit can control the gender of their unborn children. Now, off to the plains of Dune, where they are disembarking from some kind of huge tank or something. It looks a little bit like a Jawa sandcrawler, but bigger and less featureful.
Not since Stuart explained Warhammer to me have I been lost in a thicket of just letter soup.
Well, don't worry, because it's about to get a lot simpler and more complicated. Because Duke Leona's family will be greeted by a hearty companion. That's, of course, Duncan Idaho, the other weapons master and fighter, played here by...
Hold on.
Duncan
There's
Idaho,
a character in Dune whose last name is Idaho, which is the name
very
of
much
a
so.
state in the United States on Earth.
Remember, Dan, this is set in the far future. Idaho is still a storied land, known throughout for its potatoes, the, some would say, life-giving essence, second only to the spice in its importance to the galactic economy. Idaho, of course, taking an El Dorado-type position in the Duneverse. He is, of course, played by Jason Momoa, who is best known as this point I assume, Aquaman from the DC movies. Now, there's a brief shot of, so brief I had to watch it again to tell that it was, of course, Stilgar, leader of the Fremen tribe at Siege Tabor, played here by Javier Bardem, the villain from the James Bond movie where he's the bad guy in it.
He's...
That one. Okay.
We hear from someone that Arrakis is a death trap over massed armies. Perhaps these armies are at the command of the next person we see, Beast Rabban, Count of Lankavel, and eldest nephew of the Baron Harkonnen. He's played by Dave Bautista. And, of course, the Fremen people of Arrakis, as you, I'm surely know him as Mudir Nahia, which translate roughly as demon ruler. Now, of course, we only see him for but a moment before we are introduced to his boss and uncle, the Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, who is looking very foggy and is played by Stellan Skarsgård. Now, there's a lot of fire and bad things. Jessica looks very concerned, but we've got more characters to meet in this trailer. For instance, Dr. Wellington Yueh, played by Chang Chen, who, as we all know, will go on to betray the Atreides family, kind of. Now, I assume he is a distinct descendant of one Stuart Wellington, since, again, this takes place in the far future. We see some armored bad dudes, real badass fighter types. I assume these are the...
they got to save the president.
Game? Bad dudes?
No, they are, in fact, probably, I'm guessing, the Sardaukar, the fanatically elite fighting force of the Emperor. Then we get a shot of Paul walking purposely toward the camera. Duncan Idaho, again played by Jason Momoa, says, let's fight like demons, and then starts fighting people in armor as they run at him. Back to the Reverend Mother of the Bene Gesserit, as she says, an animal caught in a trap will gnaw off its own leg. What will you do? There's a shot of Chani standing outside. We see Paul in his still suit, Chani in her still suit, spaceships, explosions. At this part, to be honest, it just looks like a bigger budget version of the David Lynch Dune, but without the score by Toto. There's Baron Harkonnen, I assume, emerging from a sort of Apocalypse Now mudbath. And here is where we get to the portion of the trailer I call the walking purposefully towards the camera. Lady Jessica walks purposefully towards the camera.
Played by Rebecca Ferguson.
Played by Rebecca Ferguson. Duncan Idaho salutes with a blade. Paul salutes with a blade. Paul watches from his airship as a sandpit swallows a kind of sand crawler. Dr. Wellington Yueh walks purposefully toward the camera. There's a Fremen lady, a dragonfly helicopter. Then Robin Harkonnen, the beast, walks purposefully towards the camera. Duke Leto looks kind of sad, and Paul says, I see you. I don't think he's referring to the shot from before. That's kind of a Kuleshov experiment in juxtaposition and editing. We'll have to see the final version. Another quick shot of Stilgar. I assume Javier Bardem was not a big enough star to get his face in the trailer that much. Then there's some text that says, Beyond Fear. Duncan Idaho walks purposefully towards the camera. Then Destiny awaits. Zendaya's hair in slow-mo. Paul yells in slow-mo. And now Paul launches into a shortened version of the litany against fear, which in the original book goes like this. I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear. I will permit it to pass over me and through me. And when it has gone past, I will turn the inner eye to see its path. Where the fear has gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain. I, of course, recited this before every episode of NBC Nightly News from my 22 years of hosting that storied program. It was a little wink at Dune, as if to say to the planet Arrakis, I'll be back to you in a half hour when I'm done dealing with this small, blue, pitiful planet of the distant past that we call Earth. Then there's some flying machines. Someone, we're almost done with the trailer, Daniel.
Earth might have problems, but it's not built on an intergalactic drug trade. I mean,
now who's being naive, Daniel?
It's
called oil. It's not that hard to look at the metaphors. They're rich and thick like a good gumbo, not unlike the exact opposite of Inception, which is sort of a killer's mask, a sociopath's public face, behind which lies nothing. Now, someone dips their hand in sand. Duncan Idaho kneels and calls Paul the Duke. Paul walks in slow-mo purposefully towards the camera, and you think the trailer is almost over when you're thinking to yourself, how have I not seen a sandworm? It's perhaps the most notable thing about Arrakis is these giant fricking worms that the Fremen ride and worship as the makers when suddenly the ground erupts and people run away. It's a sandworm, not looking unlike, say, a sarlacc that has been pulled inside out, like a prolapsed colon, if you will, of a sarlacc.
It looks like a butt.
We get the title, Dune. End of trailer.
And much of this trailer is also scored to a cover of Eclipse by Pink Floyd. How do you feel about that, Tom? What are your Pink Floyd feelings?
To be honest, if I had known, I think I would have been fine with it. But I was so in the world of Arrakis that I was actually humming the soundtrack I had composed to the book when I read it. And it goes something like. Ba 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 Dune Arrakis Dune Arrakis. It's got a very Thomas Dolby feel when the lyrics kick in.
It certainly did at the end.
Some elements of Danny Elfman in there.
It started kind of like the Price is Right theme, and then it got a little more Thomas Dolby.
There was a period when, outside of hosting the Nightly News, I was only reading Dune and watching The Price is Right.
Yeah.
It was a low point in my life when I really lost track of who I was as a person and also reality. And, of course, a series of hypnotic suggestions had to be planted by the world's most noted hypnotherapists in order to snap me out of that fugue state for the 30 minutes it took to tape NBC Nightly News. I would repeat the words phonetically as they were read into my ear, because at that point I had lost the ability to speak American English, and I only spoke the languages of Frank Herbert.
Hi, my name is Graham Clark, and I'm one half of the podcast Stop Podcasting Yourself, a show that we've recorded for many, many years. And at the moment, instead of being in person, we're recording remotely, and you wouldn't even notice. You don't even notice the lag.
That's right, Graham. And the great thing about this... Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Okay,
go ahead.
And you can listen to us every week on MaximumFun.org.
Or wherever you get your podcasts.
Your podcasts.
Hi, I'm James, host of Minority Corner, which is a
podcast that's all about intersectionality. It's hosted by James with a guest host every week.
Discussing all sorts of wonderful issues, nerdy and political.
Pop culture.
Black, queer, feminism.
Race, sexuality.
News.
You're going to learn your history, their self-empowerment, and it's told by what feels like your best friend.
Why should someone listen to Minority Corner?
Why not?
Oh my God, free stuff.
There's not free stuff.
The listeners of Minority Corner will enjoy some necessary LOLs, but
but mainly a look at what's happening in our world through a colorful lens.
People will get the perspective of marginalized communities.
I feel heard, I feel seen.
Like you said, you need to understand how to be more proactive in your community, and this is a great way to get started.
Join us every Friday on Max Fun or wherever you get your podcast.
Minority Corner,
because together
we're the majority.
Well, you know, I now that we've gone through the trailer, I know you've got more to say, Tom, but I feel like it's a good time to take a little break to thank our sponsor for this episode, Stitch Fix, who I'm sure is happy that they bought an ad on our most accessible episode, like one that makes a lot of sense to everyone and isn't built on sort of a long-running in-joke. But Stitch Fix, hey, wouldn't it be great if every...
I think they probably would appreciate it more if you pronounce the name of the company correctly, since I don't believe that Frix, F-R-I-X, is a word.
Stitch Fix.
But you're right, Dan. I'm the one who's at fault here. People should go to Stitch Frix's website and use their fine product, or perhaps Stitch Fixed, who bought time on the program. Continue, Dan.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, Sticks.
Again, Sticks. I don't know how that was going to end, but Sticks Fix and Sticks Fitch are also again.
At this point, I think
names.
he's just fucking with us, Tom.
It's interesting that I didn't know how to pronounce Timothy Chalamet's name, and I was made the butt of ridicule, and yet you have trouble with Stitch Fix.
All right. Okay. Hold on. Take 3. Stitch Fix. Wouldn't it be great if every clothing store you shopped at had only your size, what styles you like, and at the price you want? Well, Stitch Fix is a personal styling company that makes getting the clothes you love effortless. To get started, go to stitchfix.com/flophouse to set up your profile, and they'll deliver great looks personalized just for you in your colors, styles, and budget. You pay a $20 styling fee for each fix, which is credited towards anything you keep. Schedule at any time, there's no subscription required, plus shipping, returns, and exchanges are easy and free. You can get started today at stitchfix.com/flophouse, and you'll get 25% off when you keep everything in your fix. That's stitchfix.com/flophouse for 25% off when you keep everything in your fix. I'll say it one more time because they highlighted it. stitchfix.com/flophouse.
Nailed it. Wow. Okay. So now that we've...
That's what we in the business and broadcasting call a done in one.
Yeah. So now we've gone over the trailer. And
yes, and I do have, thank you for asking, I do have some broad thoughts to relay about the trailer and this new vision that Denis Villeneuve has for Frank Herbert's masterpiece.
Can this be a new reoccurring segment called Broad Thoughts?
Sure, or if it ain't Brokaw, don't fix it.
Okay. Yeah.
So in this episode of If It Ain't Brokaw, Don't Fix It, we'll get to the trailer of Dune, and we're also brought to you by Stitch Fix. Sometimes stitches do need fixing, and that's what Stitch Fix is for.
Oh, okay, but if it ain't Brokaw, don't fix it. So are you asking us to fix you, Tom Brokaw? Is this a cry for help?
This whole episode has clearly been a cry for help in many different ways. And if you didn't catch on to it until now, that's your problem. Now, something that I find... First, I'll go with... I'll make a classic shit sandwich where I will start with a compliment. I will then have a criticism, and then I will have a compliment. And so there's a lot of
Takes
walking...
the sting out.
So, yeah, here's my first compliment. I love the walking purposefully towards the camera. This is a world of people with strong purposes, and they've got to walk places, and that camera is in their way. So I can't wait to see what happens when they reach the camera with that purposeful walking. Also, it's excitingly beige. It is a limited color palette on the planet of Arrakis, and they have steered into the curve of that. Now, off of the compliments onto the major criticism, something I was screaming out loud while watching the trailer when it dropped a scant few days ago, where is Fade Rotha Rabin, the other nephew of Baron Harkonnen? Some would say the better nephew, the handsome, cunning, and vain nephew that the Baron is choosing to make his heir, and who figures quite heavily into the climactic fight between him and Paul Atreides. Now, Daniel, you may remember this character as the one played by Sting in the David Lynch version.
I do remember. That is one.
He says, "I will kill him."
Yes, that's here. As mentioned, he says, "I will kill him." That is his famous line.
Do you want to know what the top 3 images I recall from the David Lynch version?
Yeah, sure. Drop them on me.
Number 1, shirtless Sting.
Yeah.
Number 2,
in his tiny space underpants.
Yeah. Number 2, I think it's Harkonnen with all the boils on his face.
Yeah, that's the Baron Vladimir.
I remember that, and of course, the big like brain-looking thing in the tank.
The third stage navigator. Yes, the one who looks kind of like a cross between a fetus, a turtle, and a scrotum, but enormous, floating in a tank of some kind of amber sort of liquid. That's what happens when you take too much of the spice from Arrakis. It's not related to the Gom Jabbar. So those are your 2 choices, Dan. You can either put yourself through the pain test, or you can be that guy. What's it going to be?
I think we know which one Dan would pick.
I mean,
he wants to be that guy.
Seems like he's having a pretty good time. Like it's just like floating in a tank. That's like being back in the womb.
It is the closest that anyone in Dune gets to kicking back. So I understand your choice. Also not seen in the trailer is Peter DeVries, the evil Mentat. But, I'm sure he's going to pop up possibly.
Yeah.
And now, so my rage at not seeing Fade Rotha, some would say the most intriguing non-Paul character in the book, was a disappointment. But, however, and here is the final compliment, it was exciting to see Charlotte Rampling in the role of Bene Gesserit, Reverend Mother Gaius Helen Mayhem. It reminded me of, in some ways, maybe an older version of her character of Consuela from the movie Zardoz. A similar film in some ways, and perhaps one that I will draw connections to when I'm watching.
Wow, that's a pretty exhaustive summary of this trailer.
Yeah, that's good. That's the exhaustive.
That's all. I'm a fucking professional. I'm a broadcast pro, you son.
So,
of a
Dan,
bitch.
how excited would you be if you were just hanging out on like a sandy beach or a desert or something, and a giant worm popped out of the ground and it had a giant gaping butthole for a head?
It is a real anus of a face for this worm. I gotta say, sandworm-wise, this is my 3rd favorite.
That's the face of God you're talking about, Dan.
This is the 3rd favorite sandworm I've seen, after the Beetlejuice sandworm and
That's
the
number 1.
original David Lynch sandworm.
Any other sandworms kind of fall by the wayside for you?
I mean, the sandworm...
who didn't make it into the top 3, Dan?
Well,
why are the graboids not in there?
There's a worm I saw in the sand when I went to the beach as like a 2-year-old when I visited California for the first time.
Oh, man. We've had a lot of fun here tonight. Dan, Tom Brokaw, me, dude.
Yep, that's the only 3 people who are here. You, me, and Tom Brokaw, and no one else.
Well, Tom, thanks for coming out. I'm sure you probably have something really important to do later. Where are you, in New York or LA right now?
Well, you could say that mentally there's only one place I ever am, no matter where my physical body is.
New York or LA?
That's Arrakis.
Right.
Physically, of course, I'm on my compound in Bozeman, Montana, as I ride out what I think is the first stages of the apocalypse.
Yeah.
And I continue through the middle and final stages as they lead inevitably to the future foreseen by the Kwisatz Haderach.
Oh, that's great. So normally whenever we have a guest on, we ask if they have anything they want to plug. You got anything you want to plug, Tom?
Just the novel Dune by Frank Herbert.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I didn't write it
context-clues, I
myself,
should
but
pick that up.
at this point, it's hard for me to tell where I begin and Dune ends. We have become so much one mind and one body. Not so much the sequels to Dune, which trail off quite a bit, but the original novel, yes, very much so.
I mean, I've been watching your Instagram account, Tom, and I keep seeing you posing wrapped up in a sleeping bag like you're the sandworm on the cover of God Emperor of Dune. Is that intentional? Is that a little Easter egg for the Dune heads?
I'm glad that you got that reference, Stuart. That was very much how I intended it. In fact, I've been doing a series of photos, only some of which I've shared with the public, in which I reenact scenes and iconic images from Dune, playing all of the characters myself. And occasionally I put on silly clothes and pretend to be the dogs from William Wegman's photography. You know, when there's the two dogs that wear human clothes. But those photos
crazy.
just come out as me wearing human clothes, which doesn't have quite the effect of a dog wearing, say, a human trench coat and a hat.
But you're
wear
holding a
trench
sign
coat
that says
and
you're a
hat.
dog, right?
Yeah, to make it clear, I had to put a sign around my neck that says, "Imagine I am a dog right now." And it's at a certain point the concept becomes slightly muddy.
And you hired Bobby Moynihan to stand in the background of every picture, dressed up like a dog catcher.
Not every picture, but many of them. Yes, just to help
not the
drive
Dune
home
ones.
the point. Just help to drive home the point that I am a dog, and also to have a little bit of fun. Bobby is out here on the ranch with me in Bozeman, and together we will begin a new civilization when the current one falls. Will it be based around the teachings of the Princess Irulan in the book Dune? Well, I think you could probably guess the answer to that.
Well, I'd like to thank you for being here. So I guess you're plugging your Instagram, and one last question before you go.
My Instagram, if it ain't Brokaw, Dune fix it. That's the full handle.
Very confusing. But before you go,
and there's no
Spelled in a
apostrophe
very
in it.
complicated way, I think.
Before you go, I did want to ask, if there's one character name that from the book that you didn't get to say that you just would like to throw in here at the very end, this would be the time. But if there's nothing, don't feel pressured by me, the Tom Brokaw Dune fanboy.
I mean, it doesn't. No one in the characters, but if you'd like me to go over the cast of the film again, of course, that's Dune, coming out this year, starring Timothy Chalamet, and of course there's Dave Bautista, Stellan Skarsgård, Charlotte Rampling, Oscar Isaac, Zendaya, Javier Bardem, Josh Brolin, Jason Momoa, and Chan Chan, and of course Rebecca Ferguson. So that's the cast of the film Dune. It was, of course, directed by Denis Villeneuve, and the screenplay is by Denis Villeneuve, Eric Roth, and John Spade. The music is by Hans Zimmer, with cinematography by Greg Rosa, edited by Joe Wyatt, production coverage legendary pressure, Warner Bros. Release. It came out in December. It is multiple days, produced by California, Joe Carasola, Jr., Mary Parent, Denis Villeneuve, and of course the makeup and costumes.
MaximumFun.org.
Comedy and culture.
Artist owned.
Audience supported.